Madam President, members of the House, a medal should reflect performance, not a passport. A podium should reflect excellence, not alignment. A tournament should reflect competition, not influence. The former British Prime Minister, Harold Wilson, in 1960, he said, and I rephrase it with some variation and adaptation, 24 hours is too long a time for the democracy. By that standard, I think both politics and sport is a day's event. I'm confused on opposition. Can we take politics out of the sport, or can we take sport out of the politics? If the opposition is framing politicians as players, elections as games, voters as the pitch, democracy as the field, media commentary, media as the bypass commentary, then by that standard, I would say politics is the best form of sport. After the Franco-Prussian War, with the rising European nationalism, what we saw that the origin of modern-day Olympics was based by a historian, by an educationist, by a philosopher. The first Olympic Games in 1896 in Athens with 14 nations, 241 athletes. For him, if nations must compete, they should compete on a field, not on a battlefield. So rivalry was embedded, flags were raised, medals were counted, but the competition remained rule-bound and control had not yet overtaken merit. The Olympism, a philosophy imbued by blending sport, culture, and education, it advocated the essential thing in life is to fight well, but not always to win. So the genesis of sport has always been in neutrality, not political leverage. Madam President, I rise to propose the motion before us tonight. I do not stand here as a professional athlete or a sportsperson, nor as a political commentator and strategist, but as a social entrepreneur and cognitive scientist. I have spent my life studying institutions and how they rise, how they endure, and how they collapse. And one lesson stands above all. Institutions survive only when they remain trusted, they remain neutral, and they are governed by the principle rather than power. Sport is one such institution. It is not merely a recreation. It is discipline, it is restraint, it is formation. It teaches the same rule applies to everyone. And in divided society, the outcome is revolutionary. It is an equalizer. It is about inclusion. A stopwatch does not recognize religion. A goal does not count differently based on ethnicity. A referee does not consult an ideology. A scoreboard tells the same story and truth to everyone. That is fairness, that is neutrality, and that is why sport unites. Now let us be clear, we are not naive. Sports has always reflected politics. It carries flags, like my colleague said. It plays national anthem. It evokes national pride. But reflection is not governance. The question before this House is not whether the politics exist in sport. The question is whether political power should govern competition and spirit of sport. And history offers us caution. Politics did not kick down the door of sport. It walked in gradually. The modern sport developed alongside the empire. By 1900, Britain controlled roughly 25% of the world land mass, nearly 400 million people. Football rules were codified in 1863. Cricket rules were defined by the Marylebone Cricket Club in 1788. Sport reflected imperial identity, but it remained governed by the rule book, not the rulers. That distinction matters because sport began as a cultural reflection of power, not as an instrument of political punishment. When medals become geopolitical capital, merit becomes negotiable. When merit becomes negotiable, the entire foundation of sport collapses. The founding idea of sport was beautifully simple. If nations must compete, then let them do it with stopwatches instead of soldiers. But history rarely cooperates with idealism. In 1960, the Games were cancelled. First World Wars, 20 million people lost lives. And then politics escalated into war. And sport does not debate, it disappeared. When the Olympics returned in 1920, defeated nations were excluded and politics had entered quietly. In 1936, it was no longer quite the Berlin Olympics, and the Games became an ideological theater. Sport was no longer just a competition, it was choreography, members of the House. By 1968, sport stood the podium itself. By 1980, with the invasion of Afghanistan, 65 nations boycotted the Moscow Olympics, affecting 7,000 athletes. The war continued anyway. In 1984, the retaliation happened in the LA Olympics. Sport became a geopolitical choreography. And by 2014, politicization evolved again, the Sochi Winter Olympics with $50 billion an investment, and we saw state implicating 1,000 athletes across the doping charges. Some may argue that sport helped dismantle the South African apartheid, where the Charter of Humanity was violated by the regime. And yes, sporting bans did apply pressure, but apartheid did not fall because of sport alone. Sport mirrored a broader moral coalition. It did not independently dismantle the regime. And here is the danger. If we turn one exceptional case into a general principle, we institutionalize politicization in sport. Since I come from a cricketing nation, the genesis and on the nexus of cricketing colonialism through capitalism, and here is when the balance sheet enters the stadium. Cricket today is not just a game, it is a civilization-scale institution. The ICC itself describes nearly 2.5 billion audience for the game of cricket, which is 30% of the humanity and 1/3 of the global population. Independent Nielsen-backed research suggests 1 billion active cricket fans. That scale matters. Sport of that magnitude cannot be treated as a private marketplace. It has to be governed purely by commercial gravity of cricketing capitalism. Is it a global public? Is it not a global public institution in everything but name? Yet global cricket increasingly behaves like a concentrated market called crickonomics. This is not merely rewarding popularity, it is a structural political dominance. When one market captures more than 1/3 of the global income, it does not simply sell tickets, it begins shaping the theater. When one country holds the largest share of revenue, the largest broadcast rights, and occupies the head of the table, the risk becomes clear. Cricket begins to resemble not a rule-based institution, but an economy where influence flows from politics, ideology influences the sport, and money flows disproportionately, dismantling the equilibrium. And this financial gravity does not remain domestic, it expands. Same happened in England when ECB sold 49% stake in the 8 franchises of the hundreds. And the private investors, including the IPL-linked ownership groups, the objective may be financial stability, but the structural consequence is integration with sport's most powerful commercial network. This is not just political annexation, it is economic expansion. Economic expansion reshapes influence just as effectively as political control. From the contemporary example of politics in play at sport, look at India. It does not just play cricket, it underwrites it. When one nation becomes the banker, the broadcaster, the investor, the power center at all, we must at least ask whether the pitch is still perfectly leveled. Capitalism rewards scale, it rewards market size, it rewards concentration. When applied to a global institution, it creates a political asymmetry. This is how politicization re-enters in the modern age. It discovered the balance sheet. It wasn't always through flags, not always through boycotts, but through dependency. Members of the House, let me be clear. This motion is not about silencing athletes. A player kneeling is an individual conviction. A government organizing boycotts is a political leverage. I defend the former. I resist the latter. Because when governments dictate participation, athletes become instruments and sports become a currency. Politics distributes power, markets distribute capital, sports distributes honor based on performance. When power dictates performance, fairness dissolves. When capital dictates structure, neutrality weakens, and when neutrality weakens, trust erodes. Without trust, sport cannot unify. In a world where trade is political, media is political, diplomacy is political, sport remains the last global institution governed primarily by shared rules. Here, neutrality is not naive. It is essential. Sports' ability to unify across religion, ethnicity, class, gender, nationality depends entirely on the confidence, on the integrity of sport. If politics become the referee, excellence becomes the ideology. If markets become the rule book, merit becomes negotiable. And when merit becomes negotiable, universality disappears. We must protect neutrality, protect merit, protect the unifying power of sport. At the end of the day, before we are citizens of nation, before we are members of party, before we are defined by flags, we are human. We share the same breath before a penalty is taken. We share the same silence before the last ball is bowled. And we have the same surge of adrenaline when the tape is broken. Our hearts do not beat in different languages. Our nerves do not recognize borders, and hope does not carry a passport. In the suspended moment before victory or defeat, we are not ideologies. We are an effort, we are vulnerability, we are an aspiration. Different flags may rise, but the struggle to rise is the same. If there remains one global space where humanity can compete without hate, where rivals can fight without dehumanization, and victory without vengeance, that space is worth protecting. Madam President, members of the House, I beg to propose the motion. Thank you all very much.